Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Football Reporters podcast. I'm joined today by Rob Dawson and by Mark Ogden, who were both at Old Trafford on Saturday afternoon as Manchester United recorded probably the most impressive win of the season, a 2-0 victory in the Manchester derby over Manchester City. I mean, Rob, first of all, the performance was perhaps even more impressive than the result, really. I mean, were you surprised by how good United were against City?
Yeah, I was really. I mean, I was saying before kickoff that, sometimes before these Manchester derbies, there have been instances where United haven't been playing well and City have looked all right. And, United fans have gone along thinking, we could get beaten 4 or 5 today. And somehow United have managed to pull out, quite significant results. What was different about this one was that they were completely dominant, I thought, from the first minute. Harry Maguire hits the bar in, I think, the second or third minute. And from then on, United were with a better team throughout. It finished 2-0. It could have been 4 or 5. United had 3 goals disallowed for offside. They hit the bar through Maguire. Ahmad hit the post. I mean, it really could have been one of those days where they put 5 or 6 past Man City. So there have been occasions where United have managed to sort of conjure up these magic results in derbies before. I'm thinking about, Marcus Rashford scoring under Louis van Gaal at the Etihad when they won 1-0. So there is form for this kind of surprise result in the Manchester derby. But I just thought that the performance in general was, we were trying to decide after the game in the press box when the last performance that was on a par with that from Man United. Some people were saying the 2024 FA Cup final under Erik ten Hag again against City when the kind of result came out of nowhere. But even that day, United weren't as dominant as they were at Old Trafford on Saturday. United were clinging on at the end, really. They won 2-1, but they were under pressure at the end. There was none of that, really, on Saturday. They were dominant from start to finish, and it could have been far more, really.
Yeah, and the obvious difference, Mark, is the manager, is the person in the dugout. Obviously, Michael Carrick's first game in charge. He'd only had about 3 days, was it, on the training pitch with them before? How much do you put down to it being him and his tactics, or how much is it just that it's a bit of a change of voice in the dugout as well?
I think it's a combination of everything. I think it's the fact that a new guy's come in, that the old guy's not there anymore. I think that's key as well, because Ruben Amorim had kind of deflated the atmosphere and the energy at the place. I think on and off the pitch, it was clear that it wasn't working. So I think the fact that somebody else has come in with a different voice, that's helped. I think we have to give credit to the coaching staff. I think maybe 3 days isn't enough to get methods in, but I think Steve Holland's arrival as a coach is a great move because, since Sir Alex Ferguson left, United haven't really had an experienced, seasoned first-team coach. Each manager that's come in has had either, friends of the programme as coaches or inexperienced young coaches, and it's not really been the level that is required. So Steve Holland, I think he's worked at Chelsea, worked with England, he'll bring a lot of defensive organisations. So I think that helped as well. But, Michael Carrick also made some big personnel changes. Kobbie Mainoo's first Premier League start. Now, it sounds ridiculous, but Ruben Amorim didn't play him once from the start of the season in the Premier League this year. So, the way he played, yes, he has his limitations. He's not the quickest and he can be a bit lackadaisical at times, but he made a big impact against City because he's got more ability to move around the pitch than Manuel Ugarte. He's better with the ball at his feet. Playing Kobbie Mainoo meant he could play Bruno Fernandes further forward, which meant he was able to influence the game more. So I think a combination of everything, but also Carrick also lifted the mood. I think the fact that we have, this whole DNA thing. I've done my column on it on Monday actually about, does DNA really matter? I don't think it does. I just think it's more like a nostalgic thing to look back at when your team was good. But fans love it. Fans love one of their own in the dugout because it means that they play the way you think the team should play. But I think it had to be more sustainable than that. But all in all, the whole package, Carrick rode the wave of euphoria at the weekend. He's got to keep it going next week, Arsenal away. But on the back of what happened against City, United have got to Arsenal with confidence they can get a result now because it was very close to the end of the day of the season. I think they can go there believing they can get a result and kind of extend this momentum and get us all talking next week about Carrick getting the job on a full-time basis.
Yeah, I think...
That's a joke, by the way.
We'll get that clipped up. I think obviously one of the other differences, Rob, was the return of the players who've been away at AFCON in Bryan Mbeumo and Amad Diallo. Obviously, Mbeumo gets the opener and Diallo was excellent, wasn't he? I think he hit the posts pretty late on. How much of a boost is it having them two back, and how much of a difference did that make at the weekend?
Yeah, it's massive because I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that they're probably 2 of United's best players. They might even be United's 2 best players. So I have got a little bit of sympathy for Ruben Amorim, really, because he's come through a run of games where he hasn't had Mbeumo and Amad and even Mazraoui as well. Diogo Dalot looks like he's he's struggling a little bit at the moment, and Amram had no option to take him out and bring Mazraoui in because they've been at AFCON. So Amram will probably be sat in his house in Portugal thinking, well, the results under me would have been better if I'd had my best players, and you could probably argue that. But yeah, it's a massive thing, and there will be an expectation now that they can go to Arsenal and get a result. Carrick was sort of saying, even in his post-match press conference on Saturday, he doesn't want to get too carried away. That's fairly obvious. He was sort of saying, we have to focus on Arsenal straight away and make sure that we can replicate the performance, because that is something that United have struggled with quite a lot for not just under Amram, but for the last sort of 2 or 3 years, that they have shown themselves to be able to pull off these results every now and again. Even under Ruben Amram, they had these kind of results. They won at the Etihad Stadium. They beat Arsenal in the FA Cup. They obviously won at Anfield earlier in the season. What they've struggled to do is to build on it and put any kind of run together. I mean, you'll know with that Amram stat that it took nearly a year, I think, to win back-to-back Premier League games, which shows how tough it was for him to find any consistency. I think a lot of United fans will look at the next run of games and think, well, they have shown themselves to be able to compete with the likes of City and Arsenal. The difficulty comes when they're playing so-called lesser teams, and they've got, I think, Fulham at Old Trafford coming up quite soon. They've got Tottenham as well. They're playing away at West Ham in February. Those really are the games that will define how well Michael Carrick does, because actually he probably doesn't need to beat the likes of City and Arsenal, as great as that is. He doesn't need to win those games to get United in the Champions League. The games he needs to win are against Fulham, Tottenham and West Ham, those kind of teams. They're the games that Amram just could not win. Now, if Carrick can find a way of finding some consistency and replicating the City performance again and again and again, United will definitely finish in the top 4 or 5 and he will qualify for the Champions League. But he's a smart guy, Michael Carrick. He will know. He's seen enough Man United games over the last 18 months, 2 years to know that that's where they struggle. And just looking now, I wonder whether he's already looking beyond that Arsenal game a little bit at that Fulham game and thinking that really is the game where he can either cement his place as a proper contender for this Man United job. As far-fetched as it sounds right now, that's the kind of game that he needs to win for Man United fans to be looking at him thinking, okay, maybe he is the guy.
Yeah, we've been quite positive so far about Manchester United, and there certainly were a lot of positives to take from the weekend. But if you're a Manchester City fan watching this, then you may be saying, well, actually, the game could have hinged on a moment in the first half that could have really impacted the game, and that was Diogo Dalot's challenge on Jeremy Doku. I didn't actually see it back until the Saturday evening, and I saw it again this morning on Sky, and inexplicable to me that wasn't a red card, that VAR didn't intervene there. Do you think I'm being a bit harsh, or do you think you probably should have walked for that?
No, to be honest, I don't think neither me or Rob watching it live thought it was that bad a tackle. In real time, it just looked like he'd basically missed the ball and just scraped his shin. Not even that, but the replay was horrific. It really was. And I can't understand how the VAR, I think it was Craig Pawson, just didn't say to Anthony Taylor, look, you've missed one there, you're going to have to review that, because it was so high up the leg. It was the sole of his boot on his knee. I mean, Jeremy Doku was so lucky not to avoid a season-ending injury there. It was really, really bad. And I think, obviously, as Rob said, Diogo Dalot's struggling right now. He's not United's best player. I think at times he can be a liability rather than an asset. But no matter how bad he's been, it's best to have 11 players on the pitch than 10. And had he been sent off so early in the game, Man City, as we know, the way that they passed the ball, even when they're not at their best, they'd have passed United off the pitch and won that game quite comfortably, I think, because United couldn't have coped with 10 men. Not in the sense of the fragile confidence going into the game. So it was a massive turning point. And I think, Pep Guardiola and Bernardo Silva both spoke after the game and said, yeah, it should have been a red, but they didn't want to use it as an excuse. And I think, credit to them for not doing that. But I think we can say, yes, it made a massive difference. He should have been sent off. He should have a 3-match ban, but he got away with it. And I think, whether he plays next weekend, Dalot at Arsenal, I think Rob's right. I think when Mazraoui comes back, he's a much better option at right back than Dalot, but he stayed on the pitch. United were very lucky. They got a great win. But yeah, that was a turning point that made all the difference.
Yeah, and Mark mentioned, Rob, that that Pep Guardiola didn't want to use it as an excuse. And you've obviously watched a lot of Manchester City this season. We were both at the Etihad when they dismantled Liverpool earlier in the season. They played some fantastic football, but they just looked miles off the best. Do you put that down to United being very good, or was it just a bad day at the office for them?
No, I mean, as good as United were, I think City, were poor, and it was a bit of a strange week really for City, because I went to Newcastle for that Carabao Cup semi-final first leg, and I thought that City would get beat there. I said it on the pod that I thought that City would get through the tie, but they would lose at St James's Park. They just looked like they were struggling for energy. They're having to play Kusanov and Max Lane at centre half, two very, very young lads. In fairness to them at St James's Park, they were absolutely outstanding, and Newcastle don't often fail to score at home. I think it was one clean sheet in more than a year, I think, and none this season. Newcastle had scored in every game at St James's Park so far that season, and City stopped them, and that was everything to do with Kusanov and Max Lane. I think the problem was at Old Trafford that you can't ask really, really young players to be consistent, every single week. They're capable of putting in these monster performances, but asking them to replicate it again and again and again, particularly in two big games in a week, was a stretch too far. And I think Max Lane, particularly in the first half, looked quite nervous. I think United kind of preyed on that a little bit, and there was a reason why he was taken off, obviously, at half-time. I was surprised that City looked like they had so much energy at Newcastle on a Tuesday, but perhaps it wasn't then a surprise that they didn't seem to have that against United. Sometimes in these games you kind of rely on the occasion to lift the players. Obviously, that never really happened, and from the first minute, really, City looked like they were beaten, and it is a little bit of a tough spell for City at the moment. Obviously, I think it's no winning 4 Premier League games, slipping further behind Arsenal in the title race. They've signed Semenyo from Bournemouth, who's given them a bit of an extra lift with a couple of goals. They've signed Mark Gahey from Crystal Palace, who will solve a little bit of that defensive issue with Elaine and Kusanov. That Ruben Dias will be back eventually, I think, in a month or so he's not too bad. There is an expectation that Josko Vardiol, who's been great for the best part of 18 months, may not play again this season, which is a massive blow. So Gahey will soften that blow a little bit. Erling Haaland is another problem. I think it's 1 goal in 7 now, and that was a penalty against Brighton. And Pep Guardiola has been saying all season that there was an issue with the responsibility that Haaland was taking with the goals, and he was sort of talking about this months ago, that other players had to step up and take that responsibility off Erling Haaland. And really, it's been borne out in the last couple of weeks. Erling Haaland stopped scoring. No one else has really been able to find the net, and City have been drawing or losing games. So there's a couple of things that need to change for City. They need to get, obviously, Gahey coming in is a massive boost. That'll fix a bit of the issue at the back, but they also need to get Erling Haaland scoring again, because they are a different team when he's on fire. And unfortunately for Pep Guardiola, there isn't anyone else there at the moment who's showing themselves to be capable of getting sort of 10 or 15 Premier League goals like Foden did a couple of years. So they need someone to step up with goal scoring as well.
Yeah, and they've bolstered the defence with Mark Gahey. They've bolstered the attack with Semenyo. Midfield, obviously, is an area that they've not addressed in the January window so far. Mark, what did you make of the midfield at the weekend?
Well, a lot of those issues that Rob's addressed about the defence and attack, they're all rooted from the midfield. I mean, let's be honest, this season we've all looked at Man United's midfield and said they can't get around the pitch. There's not enough players there. You've got Casemiro who can't run. You've got Kobe Mainoo who's not the quickest. You've got Agati who can't pass. So basically, the Man United midfield is regarded as one of the, I won't say it's one of the worst in the Premier League, but it's one that is constantly underperformed. Yet they dominated the game against City at the weekend, because City's midfield was even worse. Now, Rodri played, but Rodri, even though I think he played his first game in June after a crucial ligament injury, Rodri's really struggling to get back to his best. I mean, he's not the player he was prior to his injury. And it's understandable, because a crucial ligament injury can really take the best out of a player. So you've got Rodri in there. They had Bernardo Silva, who, great player that he's been, again, is not very mobile, and Phil Foden, who, his strength is going forward. So, Man City's midfield is nowhere near the level that it should be. Now, I was thinking about, ever since Man City became a dominant force under Roberto Mancini, 2010, 2011, they've had really good midfielders. Yaya Toure, Fernandinho, Kevin De Bruyne, Ilkay Gundogan, Rodri at his best. And right now, they've got nobody of that ilk. They've got no Yaya Toure. They've got no Kevin De Bruyne. Tajani Reinders, he's okay, but he's not in the same league as the ones that have gone before. Nico as well, he's been poor since he arrived a year ago. There really isn't anyone there. Now, yes, we know they like Elliot Anderson, but that's not a deal that can get done this month. They probably like Adam Wharton too. But for me, there's a great quote, I think it's a Bill Clinton quote back in the presidential election in 92. It was like, what's the big reason? It's like, it's the economy, stupid. It's the economy. Well, the City thing is the midfield stupid. That is exactly where the problem is, because you fix the midfield, you fix the defence, you get the ball to Haaland quicker, and it's all from the midfield. Any team that wins a trophy will tell you that the midfield is where you dominate the game, you can control the game. But City haven't got it, and that's why I think that the way that the title race is going, we know that Arsenal dropped points in Nottingham Forest, but they can keep dropping points because Man City aren't good enough to catch them. So City will keep dropping points as well. So the race for second is probably more interesting than the race for the title.
Beth, let me just ask you both then, you and Mark. Obviously, the result had quite big connotations for the Premier League title race, with City dropping more points. Arsenal couldn't capitalise. They went to Nottingham Forest and drew 0-0. Beth, I mean, do you still see this as Arsenal's to lose? I think everyone's kind of decided that that's the way it's going with the lead that they've got. I mean, do you think there's any way that City catch them?
I think that the one sort of shred of hope that you would have if you were Manchester City at the moment is that, you know, Arsenal have had a couple of opportunities now to sort of put themselves out of sight a little bit. I mean, they still managed to, despite dropping points themselves at the weekend, extend their gap at the top. So, you know, if you can be doing that while not getting wins and not playing particularly well, then, you know, that probably bodes quite well for you. But if you're Manchester City, you're maybe looking at it and saying, well, they've had a couple of chances now to really sort of kick out and go out in front. And, you know, that's what Liverpool did last season. They were quite good at that, at capitalising on, you know, when the rivals dropped points. And so I think by the time they beat Manchester City in the February, they were about 11 points clear, I think, at that point. And you sort of, that just settled everybody's nerves a little bit and made everyone think, right, this is Liverpool's year. And I think, you know, there's every chance, we've talked about City's frailties, I think there's every chance that Arsenal could well be 10, 11, 12 points clear in a few weeks' time. However, you know, if Arsenal managed to drop a point or two and City managed to string a couple of wins together, particularly with Gay coming in, if Semenyo can continue his sort of goal scoring form and they can get it back to within sort of 5 or 6 points, then maybe you're looking at it and saying, well, you know, you're only 1 or 2 results away from Arsenal being a little bit nervy, particularly considering they've got to go away to the Etihad still this season. So yeah, I think Arsenal will win. I think they are the best team, despite the fact that they, you know, they're maybe not, you know, massively convincing or massively entertaining to watch. Still think that they're most organised, most well-structured team in the league, and I think that's probably going to be enough for them to win the title this season.
Well, before I ask you the same question, our producer Sam has just highlighted something that you said on another of the ESPN Products FC TV, that Arsenal are going to be the weakest Premier League champions. Now, has that been taken out of context, or are you going to back that up?
No, I don't think it has. I mean, the point I was making was that you look at the Premier League champions of the last decade, right? You've got Man City, you've got probably one of the best, if not the best Premier League team ever. And they won, 4, 5, 6 titles? And each time they won it, they were by far and away the best team. Despite the fact Liverpool ran them close, to win a title with that Jurgen Klopp Liverpool side pushing them so close shows how good City were. And then, by the same token, the fact that Liverpool were able to beat City to the title twice on a Jurgen, also once on the Jurgen Klopp, once under Arne Slot, shows how good they were. So this Arsenal team are not in the same league as the Liverpool teams that won it or the City teams. So then you're looking at the Chelsea team under Antonio Conte. Well, they were pretty formidable that year. They got the job done. They won it by a mile. And then you look at Leicester. I think Leicester 2016. Now, you know, the Leicester team was a great functioning unit. You know, front and back, it did what it had to do. So the point I was making was that Arsenal aren't as good as the great Liverpool and City teams. And if they were one of the strongest title champions, they'd be 15 points clear by now, but they can't take advantage of the slips of their rivals. So they're being put under no pressure whatsoever by the rivals. So City and Liverpool, when they won it, they were absolutely neck and neck. They couldn't separate them, apart from that year Liverpool won it by a mile. But Liverpool knew even in that season that City was still capable of pushing them. Who's capable of pushing this Arsenal side? Nobody. You know, City keep dropping points. Villa are dropping points. Liverpool are nowhere near. Chelsea are nowhere near. Man United are nowhere near. So Arsenal should be so far ahead, but they're not killing it off. So even now, despite the weakness of their rivals, they're only 7 points clear. And they're looking a little bit nervous. So, yes, they've got some great players, but they've got a centre-forward who can't score goals in Victor Gyökeres. They've got, you know, a midfield that Declan Rice is great, but Martin Odegaard frustrates. Looks good at moments, then misses out. So the point I'm making is that Arsenal will win the title this year, but they'll win it because of the failures of their rivals rather than the brilliance of themselves. So going back over the last 10 years, I think that, you know, Arsenal or Leicester, I mean, it's unfair to call Leicester a weak champion because they won it, but I think Leicester or Arsenal as the least impressive is the wrong phrase as well. What I'm saying is the best teams that win the title the last 10 years, Arsenal are in that league. Sorry, they're not in the same league. Do you disagree?
Well, I'd still genuinely think there's a chance that City might win this. And I know that sounds stupid after 4 games without a Premier League win.
That's my argument then, doesn't it? If Arsenal,
yeah, I suppose it does. And the question that we've been asking about Arsenal all season hasn't been answered yet about when it really comes down to it in March and April. Do they have enough, whatever it is, the quality to grind out results if City are anywhere near them? I don't think you can't answer that question until Arsenal obviously go and answer it themselves, and it'll either be yes or no. And I just think with Semenyo and Guéhi that City will get an extra boost. I think that the chance that Arsenal will go deeper in the Champions League than City, that City will get knocked out. They'll start being able to focus on domestic games, on the Premier League in particular. I think the gap will get closer than it is now, and that will be a real test of Arsenal's mettle and whether they've got what it takes to get over the line, because it's all very well having a great squad and the best players, that's fine, but part of the title race is just getting over the line. You know, it was never really answered last year with Liverpool. You know, Liverpool won it before anyone really got their act together. I think there's a danger for Arsenal that maybe City get closer to them. There's a real test of their mentality, and City just go on one of those runs still and put Arsenal under massive pressure and find a way to pip them right at the post.